How's everyone doing tonight? We're going to be live with Ken from Scaly Crew Reptiles. He should be here any moment. In the meantime, I would like you guys all to take a look into USARC. They are a great organization out there that fights for your rights as reptile keepers and breeders. You know, they are a not-for-profit organization out there. They will notify you if there is any alerts in your area, alerts in the state. You know, Phil Goss is the president of USARC, and there's also USARC Florida. And that is another great organization that is great to support. So Ken is right here. I'm going to add him to the stage. Ooh. How are you doing tonight?
Hey, pretty good. Can you hear me?
Yep. You got perfect timing. How did your reptile adventure begin?
Oh, geez. Well, I would probably say that my mom enabled me quite a bit as a kid. I always loved animals. I grew up around animals. Chickens, cows, sheep, pigs, that sort of stuff. Even through schooling, I picked classes that were animal associated. My schools generally had that. I love being outdoors. I was always catching critters and stuff like that. And so, my mom kind of connected with me in that way. She got me a subscription to the Reptiles magazine. And pretty much I would read that every month and pick out stuff I liked. And then we'd see if we could find it, if it was something that I could do. We just read up on it. If she liked it and I liked it, we thought we could keep it, we'd go for it. And I pretty much started the reptile obsession. After that, I started collecting stuff. After I got a pretty good grasp on it, I started collecting stuff on my own. And my first things that I bred were bearded dragons and leopard geckos. I bred those for a number of years, and then started to kind of dabble in other things. And my first snake that I bred was a Sandbo, and I still breed Samboas today. So that was pretty cool. That was fun. And I've always loved Samboas, and discovering the morphs along the way as like I grew and as the hobby grew, more things started coming out. It was pretty exciting to see all that. I'm a little bit older than I might look, so I've been in it for a while. I've been breeding for over 20 years now.
Oh, really? Wow. I wouldn't have guessed you were that old.
Yeah, I'm 40.
Okay.
And along that route, I took breaks. I had 2 kids, got married, all that sort of stuff. So, here and there I had to downsize or take breaks or do whatever. But I always kept the Samboas along the way. And then most recently, the blue tongue skinks. This is my 3rd year in blue tongue skinks.
Well, that's great how supportive your mom was early on. Do you remember the first reptile you guys both got from like Reptiles magazine? Or I know it's been a while.
I don't remember that far back. I do remember we had these little peacock and gold dust day geckos. Those were some of the first ones that I can remember getting. But we had a lot of stuff. We even ended up doing a live planted vivarium. And I think we had 5 or 6 frogs in this like 55-gallon long live planted vivarium. It was incredible. It's something I've never even done anything to that scale since then. It was so crazy.
Well, and something like that, frogs thrive in,
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Can you do like bioactive with sandboas at all?
Sorry, what was that? You kind of cut out there for a second.
Oh, can you do like bioactive at all with sandboas?
Oh, for sure. For sure. A lot of people think, just because they're named Sandboas that you have to keep them on sand. But actually, in my opinion, that's probably the worst substrate for Sandboas. I don't think it holds their like tunnels that they dig very well. It's really dusty. It gets too dry. Samboas actually do need a little bit of a humidity. Most people don't think that. So I would prefer, like, if you were going to do a naturalistic or even a bioactive type setup for Samboas, would be like a soil to sand mixture, maybe throw in some leaf litter and mulch, that sort of thing. And then you can throw in your isopods and plants if you want, that sort of thing. They're going to dig up some of the plants, but as long as you do really hardy ones, they'll probably be fine. But yeah, you can absolutely do bioactive with those.
Well, and even if you're not the biggest fan of plants, it sounds like you could probably do just with isopods and the leaf litter and stuff, and do
Right.
some fake plants, and that way you don't have to worry about the sandboas destroying them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Especially because the sambo or the isopods, they're gonna eat their poop, the sambo poop. They're gonna eat the leaf litter, and they'll even eat the shed skin. So it's definitely beneficial to have them in there. They'll do great with them too. They're not going to bother them at all. The sambos actually have pretty rough skin, so most species of isopods will be just fine in there with them.
Now, what's too much humidity for sandboas, would you say? Because you want to keep some moisture for the isopods, but not get it too moist for them.
Yeah, for me, I do a pretty big gradient with a really moist hide box. So one side of the cage is going to be dry, very dry. That's usually where I put the water bowl, just on the one side where it's dry. And then the other side, you're going to want to be actually fairly moist, probably somewhere around 60% or so humidity. And I put a really moist hide box in there too, so they can choose if they really want to, like if they're shedding, they can get right in there and get amongst either wet paper towel or moss or whatever you want to put in there that holds a lot of moisture. They definitely will go in there and hang out for a good week while they're preparing to shed, and it really helps them out.
Well, and that will work out perfect then still for the isopods. They're going to have their damp side to thrive, and they'll venture some to the other side to eat stuff as they go too. So I was looking at some of the sandboas you have, and you got some with some nice red. What's the reddest sandboa combination you've seen out there?
The Reddest Sandbo. So there's a couple of different like lines, I guess you could say. There was a line that people used to call nuclear. Um, there's a little bit of, I don't want to say controversy, but there's a little bit of disagreement on where that came from, or yeah, like that one, or what exactly that is, the nuclear Samboa line, which is kind of what that looks like. And then there's a locality line called the Dodoma, and that again is a bit debatable, but it's actually more proven nowadays when you've seen people go to Africa and they go to Tanzania and that Dodoma region. They've seen these sandboas in the wild, and they are a lot brighter orange in that location. Not sure if that has something to do with their diet or their, I don't know, substrate that they're in, but I mean, you can replicate it in captivity without any of that, so it's got to be genetic, right? That like this Sambo is incredibly orange. And that is my orangest one that I have right there. So a lot of people do strive to get the brightest oranges that they can, and then kind of the palest or the whitest white patterns on their albinos. I have two different kind of lines of albino. One that looks a lot like a hypo albino, kind of like a hibino. And it's just kind of a pale yellow with like pale cream colors to it. And then I have that line, which is like crazy neon orange with really white blotches on it.
Is there much difference between the two genetically, or is it just mainly polygenic
I don't
bred for
think
different
so.
colors?
I don't think so because I can cross the two and I can get a nice mixture, you know. So I don't. It's I think it is kind of polygenic in that sense, where it's not really like a gene. It's just kind of a polygenic thing. So take the Dodoma for instance. If that's what they look like in the wild in that very small region, they're basically line breeding themselves in the wild. And so you know that's kind of what you're doing with them in captivity. And I've crossed both of mine together, and I get a nice mixture of some of them light yellow colors and some of them bright orange color in the same litter.
Have you tried, and I don't know if you have any that locality, the Dodoma to like albinos to try to get more of a vibrant red orange albino? Or is that
Have
frowned
I
against?
have I crossed them that way? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Um, I haven't. But I know other people have, and I don't think it's frowned upon. I think it would just be if you really wanted that, like almost what you would call like pure Dodoma. You wouldn't want to cross them if you wanted that lineage to stay pure. But in my opinion, I don't think it matters. I don't think there's, there's not a species differentiation like if you take localities in some of the carpet pythons or in some of the chondros and stuff like that, they got they got some pretty serious business there with their localities. I don't think it's that heavy in Sambos. Yeah, even I mean, if you trace Sambos back far enough, there was even some arguments that the albino was a different species at one point. So they thought that the albino was an Egyptian Sambo, and they gave it a different subspecies name from the normal Kenyan Sambo. They've since, over the years, decided they're all the same. They're all under the same name. So, stuff like that can change at any moment, I think, in our hobby. And it's always good to keep lines pure if you can, but it's also, these are pets. We're not really reestablishing any zoological wild stuff. We're doing pets,
Yeah.
And I think some of
And
that you could even correlate to blue tongue skinks as well. A lot of people are sometimes up in arms over the differences between the species, but again, they're not an endangered species anywhere, especially the Australian ones. They're practically a backyard lizard everybody can find. So
yeah, the majority are pretty common.
what's that?
Oh, the majority are pretty common in the wild. Yeah, they're
Right.
the only way that there'd be an issue, I think, is maybe all the feral cats over time,
Yeah.
because those are getting bad in Australia. But yeah, we're captive breeding majority, generations of stuff that's not affecting them. And like you said, yeah, it's not going to go back to the wild anytime.
Yeah. I mean, even in Australia, they're not plucking them out of the wild for the pet trade. They're not doing that. So the stuff that they're doing for the pet trade over there is it's all captive type things. If every now and then they find one of those crazy morphs in the wild, that'll turn up in a collection somewhere. But they're not just gathering bunches of them from the wild to do for the pet trade. They're breeding them all. So,
Well, and that one's a little weird on the ones in the wild. It sounds like if you donate them to the wildlife park, they can then breed them and then sell them through their non-zoo counterpart,
right.
or something like that.
Hey,
However exactly
however they
works.
got to do it
Whatever.
is good.
Yeah. So how is the Sandboa market then? There's a variety of colors and pattern mutations. Is it pretty healthy?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a good amount. It's no ball python set of morphs or anything, but I think there's a good amount of morphs to work with, and I'm actually working with a triple visual set of Sambos right now, and I think you can get plenty more in there as far as recessives go, and create some really crazy looking animals that either are really rare and haven't been created a lot yet, or maybe even haven't been created at all yet. And then as far as the pet trade goes, I think, I think they sell pretty good for me. I don't typically have a lot left over. For instance, last year's stock, I have 6 left from last year's stock. That's pretty good, I think.
Yeah.
And I get decent amount of requests. I think a lot of people know what they are too. So when I'm vending shows or whatever, a lot of people already know what a sandboy is. It's not a lot of exoticness to try and explain there. They already know that it's a cool, small, little, great pet snake. So that helps kind of sell itself too when people already know that it's something that's kind of commonly available.
Well, I think, what you said right there, they're kind of smaller, they don't get 20 feet like a retic. You got a wide variety of colors, even from a pet perspective, orange or yellow, or there's a wide other varieties I've seen that you have, those stand out to pet keepers. And, what would you say, a 40-gallon size tank's good for an adult, or
40 would be probably big, actually. 40 would be good for like an adult female. She would love it in there. And that would be fine. I wouldn't say no to a 40. I think for a male, I might say no to a 40. That's too much. 20-gallon long for a male. They grow slow. I feed mine pretty good, but they're a heavy-bodied snake, and they're a boa. They're still a boa constrictor. So a lot of people are so used to feeding snakes every 7 days on the dot all the time. And, a heavy bodied boa doesn't actually need to eat that much. I will do it when they're growing for sure. I'll do every week when they're growing, but the adult males, they'll go on hunger strikes for months and they're totally fine. And it doesn't worry me at all. I mean, they'll just, for months, they won't eat anything. And they don't drop a gram, they stay happy, healthy, really good weight. And then the females, they're so heavy bodied. The only reason that you would want to feed them a bunch is if they were gravid. If they weren't gravid, you could give them, a large mouse every few weeks if you wanted. And they're still going to be fine. So I think their growth, you can spread that out over quite a few years, and then you don't have to spend so much up front. You can buy your baby, spend a little bit on a small cage that fits your budget, your spacing, whatever that is, and then just let the animal grow with you. Once it gets to a certain size, then you can start looking around for another upgrade. And they're not like, some of the bigger snakes where they do like face rubbing if they're in too small of a cage or anything like that. They're a lot less active because they like to burrow. So just grow the cage with them. And like you said, maybe 40-gallon maximum for an adult female, 20-gallon maximum for an adult male. Males are a lot smaller.
the length and girth size-wise, males are a lot smaller?
Yep, for sure. Yeah. So, a female be like 24 to 30 inches maybe in length. And then some of them get really fat. Again, depends on how much you feed them. A lot of people overfeed these snakes. It's not detrimental though. They're naturally chunky. So they can get, a couple inches around for females. But males are going to stay, probably 18 to 20 inches, really lean, thin looking snakes. There, most of them, their thickness probably isn't any bigger than my thumb.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And I prefer that my males stay on the leaner side anyway. Just for breeding purposes, I feel like they're a little bit more productive when they're that way, because again, you can get them chunky pretty easily.
So being a slower growing species, is more like 3 to 4 years for reproductive age on a female?
Yeah, so most of the time on my regimen, I can get one of my holdback babies, females, ready to breed in 3 years, most of the time. That's probably the soonest you would be able to do it, though. And I'm not saying I power feed or anything. I bump up sizes a lot faster than I think most people are usually do. There's such a heavy body snake. You kind of, everybody thinks like, okay, the mouse has to be the same width as the snake's width, but they're boa constrictors. They can stretch pretty good, so you can give them a larger meal than it looks like they can take. And so that's generally how I bump up sizes. I give them pretty big meals, and that helps them grow a lot faster. A lot of people do smaller meals, which is totally fine. I'm not saying that's wrong at all. But the smaller meals, they're going to just grow a lot slower, and then you could take 5 years to get a female up to breeding size, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that.
No, I guess I've always been told you do want somewhat of a noticeable lump when you're feeding a snake. So that
Yep.
makes sense that, it would be slightly bigger than the female.
Yep. Yeah, and you're correct. That's correct. With Sambos, their head is way smaller than their body, so I think it kind of weirds people out when they're like, "Am I supposed to give a mouse that's going to create a lump bigger than their body when their head is like way tinier?" But nope, they can stretch it. They can do it.
Are they hard breeders?
No, not at all. Not at all. I brewmate mine, but a lot of people don't, and they have very easy success. You just put them together, and usually you wind up with babies. They're really not a big deal. So I brewmate mine. I bring them down to high 60s, low 70s for a few months, probably 2 to 3 months, I would say. It's never exact. I'm basically judging stuff on the weather around here. So it's never exact for me. I also judge it too based on the animal. If it looks like the animal is sleeping, they can stay asleep. If it looks like they're out moving around, then okay, well, maybe I'll wake them up early because they're out moving around. But for pairing, I've never had any problems with females eating males. I know some snakes where the female is bigger than the male, that can be a concern. I've never had it. I've had a female bite and constrict a male once. I think she was just a food response, because once I separated them after that, they were fine. So that might have been a food response. But for me, I put the males in. I like to sit there and watch behaviors. I enjoyed learning from the snakes on their behaviors that I can observe and learn that way. So I'll put them together and I'll just watch them for a little while and see what they do. The male has a very distinctive breeding dance, I guess you could call it. Exercise. I don't know. But the male will rub his nose all the way down the back of a female like he's giving her a massage. That's a good sign. So the male's interested. And then the female, her sign that she's interested usually is just lifting her tail. So that usually is, if I see those two behaviors or even one of those behaviors, I'll leave them be. I'll put them together and leave them be. And I do pairings for about a week. I'll put them together for about a week, 4 days to a week. And I'll take the male out. I'll feed him. I'll give him a break for a few days. And I'll do that again. And I pair them like that off and on for 2 months ish. Not an exact science.
Do you think you need to do it that long?
I don't think so. No, I just do that to be sure. I don't think you really need it that long. Honestly, if you probably saw a lock, then that's all you would need. You don't always see it though. So
now, what about? So, say one of them's not fully in the mood. Is there any real downside to that, or do you just see them opposite ends of the tank and separate?
Yeah, I think there isn't a downside to it, I would say. But yeah, if you put your male in there and he's on one end and she's on the other end and they're like that for multiple days, then it's a pretty clear sign that neither one of them is interested. And then you could either wait it out, or you could try bumping some food in them. Sometimes if you do like smaller meals, but every few days, instead of the bigger meals spread apart, the smaller ones closer together. Sometimes that's like, oh, there's an excess of food. It kind of triggers that in their brain, like, oh, there's an excess of food. Maybe I should do something about that and use this opportunity to make babies.
Well, I think that's really beneficial. I kind of start doing that with the skinks also, once they start pairing. So you said you brumated them 68 to 72. Are you doing basically everything like northerns in them in the same room?
Yep. Yeah, I do them all the same. It's kind of nice because the Sandbo is like it hot when the skinks like it hot, and then the brumating temperatures for both of them is also the same. The high 60s, low 70s. So it works out really well that I can do them all in the same room, all with the same set of temperature settings. So it works out really nice for me.
Yeah, that's makes setting up everything a lot smoother. What about
Sure.
establishing the Sandboa babies? Pretty easy.
It's pretty easy. They I feel like they did at one point have a bad rap for being fussy babies. I don't know. I don't know if that's because, ages ago when I started, maybe there were more wild caught ones than there are today. Today, I don't think there's barely any wild caught ones. If you found a wild caught one today, you almost might want to jump on it just to be like, "Whew, that's probably some fresh blood that I'm not going to see for years." So I think that might have been the initial thing, was maybe there was more wild caught ones in the beginning, and that was where the fussiness was coming from. I think now that they're so captively bred with the morphs and everything over a long time, they've almost kind of bred that fussiness out. For me, the fussiness comes whether it's live or frozen. That's pretty much the only thing that I have to deal with. I really don't have any trouble getting them to eat a mouse.
So it's just pretty much random, if anything.
Mm-hmm. Excuse me. I personally like to start offering frozen. I don't think most people do it that way, but I do. I will also wait a good while after they're born before I even offer them food. Maybe might be 2 weeks, maybe even longer. They're pretty much, when they're born, I just make sure they all look good, healthy. I set them up all in their individual bins, and then I pretty much wait for them to shed, which can be anywhere from a week to 2 weeks, maybe a little bit longer than that. And then I'll offer them frozen thawed. I don't usually start them off on live. And then if they don't take frozen thawed, I'm wait another week. I'll do it again. I'm gonna wait them out, you know. Most of the time that works. I think if I go again, this is totally like random for me, but you know, if I go maybe a couple months without them eating, then I'll do live just to make sure that they'll at least eat that. And they almost always take live. That's what they're. If you have a fussy eater, they almost always eat live. So I breed my own mice for that. Which, funny enough, last year I I bred a whole bunch of mice and had all my live pinkies ready just in case I needed them. I didn't need any of them, so all the mice I produced last year I ended up freezing. So I have a nice stockpile of frozen mice now that they all ate frozen thawed pretty much right out of the gate. It was a very easy year for me.
Well, that's nice for, the customers that get it. Not everyone wants to deal with live mice. And it's simple to thaw out a mice or, and feed it for your kid. And then, you're good for a week, or, if they're older, they can do it themselves. And
yeah, yeah, exactly. I think some things too that people kind of forget is they're a nighttime type of snake, and they're an ambush predator. So if you keep those two factors in mind when you're feeding a Sambo, you can kind of trigger them to eat. If you kind of figure out how that works for them. So wait till it's dark, nighttime, turn out all the lights, feed them in the dark. They do like enclosed tight spaces. So a lot of people have success using a feeding container. So you take a tiny little sandwich tub or whatever, Ziploc tub, and you put your mouse and your snake in there and just leave that overnight. That usually works. But they're an ambush predator too. So if you have this nice big setup and they're burrowed down and you dig them up to feed them, that's not what they want. They want to stay burrowed. So if they're in your nice big setup and you want to feed them at that time or at that day or whatever, you can kind of trick them into coming out by like tapping the sand around their body or the substrate around their body. And that'll usually trigger them to poke their head out. You can kind of, once you know where their head is, you can kind of dance the frozen thawed mouse around the substrate in front of them, and then they'll strike it and bring it down under the substrate and eat it under there.
Do you have to really warm it up a lot for them, or not really?
I warm it, yeah. I wouldn't say that it's excessively warm though. Like I don't know that is a contributing factor to getting them to eat.
Yeah, they don't have heat pits now that I think about it. Never mind.
No, yeah. So I don't think that really makes a difference. I know some people might say it does, and maybe it does, but I don't think so. I don't think it really matters. As long as it's room temperature or warmer, it'll probably be fine.
Yeah. So how was your first season breeding blue tongues?
Oh, I failed miserably. No, it wasn't miserably. So when I'm going for a new species, I like to just get one or two and learn the species. Just learn it. Keep it for a while, see how I interact with it, how it interacts with me, how I've set it up, if it likes the way I've set it up. Just make sure that we get along as a cohesive unit. So my first season, I did buy a pair. I bought a pair, a male and a female, and I kept them for a while, and I gotta tell you, from bearded dragons to blue tongue skinks are way easier care wise, way easier. So that right out the gate was a bonus for me. I was like, man, blue tongue skinks they're so easy. So that was a big plus for me. So then after that, I had to learn how do I pair them, and that was That was a learning curve. I now that I have more and I know what I'm looking for and what I'm doing, I realize that the pair that I had are a lot more aggressive than most blue tongue skinks. I didn't realize that at the beginning because I didn't know. That was the only pair I've ever had. That was the only experience I had. But those two in particular are aggressive. The female and the male, they're both very aggressive. As far as breeding goes.
Okay. Yeah, I was going
But
to
I
ask you
did.
for.
Go ahead. What's that?
Oh, I was just going to say, I was going to ask if they were aggressive breeders or if they were aggressive towards you.
Oh, sorry, you cut out again. What, aggressive
Oh,
what?
breeders, or if they were like more aggressive, like towards you as pets, but it sounds like as breeders.
I still can't hear what you're saying. It's
I
just
wonder.
empty.
One sec. Is that better?
Yeah, it was a little delayed, but I did hear. Is that better?
Let me try one thing.
I heard that.
So is it just a delay?
It might have been a delay, but it was like I could see you talking, but then I couldn't hear anything.
Okay. So your other ones, they're a lot easier to breed, though.
Yeah, for sure. So anyway, those first two, I put them together, and I was not prepared for that kind of that kind of response. But I figured it out. Eventually I did get them to lock. I got them to lock multiple times. I think she had 5 or 6 locks in my first year. And then after that, she went off food, which I didn't expect either. She wouldn't eat at all her entire pregnancy. Wouldn't eat anything. At the very end, I got her to eat live dubia. That was it at the very end. And then she gave me slugs, and I don't know how many because she was eating them. I came home to her eating them, and I was like, "What are you doing?" But then I realized they were all slugs, so I was like, oh, "Okay." So anyway, that was the first pairing, and then I ended up getting another female and another male, and I raised those up for like a year, maybe a little bit less than a year, about 10 months maybe. I raised those up for about 10 months, and then I put them through brumation, and then I did another 2 sets of pairings, and there was a night and day difference between these 2 pairs. I have no, like, I guess it's just a personality thing, but the male, he latched onto the female right away. He wasn't so wishy-washy like my previous male was. I feel like my previous male was almost afraid of the female. And he had right to be. She was crazy. But this male, he had no fear. He went right in for her, and she also was extremely receptive. He didn't. Even when he latched on, she was already lifting her tail. So the other female, when that male latched onto her, my first season, she was trying to bite him while he was latched on. She was like, "I'm not ready for this. I don't want you." And he really had to work at getting that tail up on her too through all of the lockings. But this second pairing, it's like they were meant for each other. He went right for her, and she was ready for him. And she gave me my first litter that I had. So that second pair was a lot better.
Have you been able to get babies from that first girl?
No, I have not. So this is her 3rd try this year. And so the first year I got slugs. The second year, nothing at all. She ballooned up like crazy though, but no slugs or babies. So I don't know what happened last year. And then this is her 3rd year. And for me, normally I would say like, okay, 3 strikes, you're probably going to be out for me. You're not really, you're probably not going to be in it for the long term for me. But I have a limited amount of animals to work with. So what I'm going to do if she doesn't go this year is I'm going to do different males and maybe multiple males. Because so far I've been doing the same pairing. Because originally I wanted those two to be together. She's a very red animal, and he's from James Fenn's Magma line. So the two animals are extremely red, and I really want them to go together. But I've paired them both together for 2 years now. This is actually the 3rd year again. I paired them both together. So I need to start doing something to kind of rule out who is at fault. If it's the female that's at fault, or if it's the male that is at fault, or maybe both of them. Who knows?
Well, that's the hard part, that first year you could have been, a little maybe late to get that first successful lock, and she ovulated
Right.
already. And
Right.
that's why you got slugs. Obviously we're kind of guessing here. And
Nope, I agree.
and then for the second year, sadly, I've had a lot of that happen on females. You'll get them to breed 5 times. They look like they're getting nice and thick, and then they basically, I think, like the follicles reabsorb. And
Yeah,
that's from what I get from like other species. The follicles are basically like water, so it's easy to absorb. So it makes sense
definitely.
why that these could also, why they do it, I honestly, I don't have a amazing answer for you. I've
Yeah.
each year I change it some. you know have you changed much your practice, throughout the first 2 to 3rd year, other than adding more?
Not really. I'm trying to think here. So I've
Temps same.
obviously, yeah, I've kept the temperatures the same. I didn't do anything extreme or length of time difference. I did those the same. I felt like my brumation was good. I felt like that was good. They went down the way I would expect them to go down. They were buried, didn't care about food or anything like that. They didn't want to come out. So that to me is successfully for the low temperatures, right? Um, and then the males are usually what triggers me to bring them up. So as far as length goes, I don't think it was any different than last year. It may have been by like a week at most, if it was different in length of time. But I pretty much let the males determine that, because they come out. They come out before the females, and they are scratching at the door to be let out. Um, so I don't think I've changed that sort of thing very much at all. I've been trying to pay attention to some of the more subtle things, though. So, like before, I didn't really pay attention to shedding when that happened between the two of them. Now I'm kind of looking at that a little differently, and trying to see if that is of importance. So I'm documenting it this time to kind of be like, okay, if this guy bred before he shed to this female, and then he bred that female after he shed, are they both going to be successful, or is the one before going to be successful, or the one after, or whatever? I don't even know if that has any relevance, but it might.
I've heard both answers. I've heard if you breed them before they shed, the sperm is not fertile, but I've got babies from those ones, so I would assume that the sperm is good. It's probably, becoming good during brumation. So whether or not they fully shed or not. I would imagine it'd still be good and active in the hemipenes.
I think so. I don't think, in my opinion, I don't think shedding makes a difference, but I am noting it in case it does. But something else that I did kind of pay attention a little bit more this year too was finding sperm plugs. I'm noticing that some of my males, even though they're out and about looking around and wanting to be out, they won't actually breed the female right away. If I pair them together, it seems like he's interested, but he'll kind of nuzzle around and then be like, nah. And I've noticed that sometimes they need to like get that sperm plug because sometimes they'll do it when I pair them together. They're not interested, but then he'll rummage around and kind of eject those sperm plugs, and then within a day or two, I do that same pairing again. Now he's ready to go. So sometimes I'm kind of thinking maybe they need to kind of clear the old stuff out before they're ready. So again, that's something I'm kind of documenting just to see, like, okay, do they need to get rid of that old stock first and then they're good to go? Maybe more fertile at that point too. And again, I'm a lot more attentive to behavior cues. Before when I only had one pair, I really left them in there. I really wanted them to go together, even if they weren't ready. I'm like, I'm gonna leave you in there for as long as I have to finally make you pair up. But now, if that behavior cue really isn't there, it's when I put them together, I'm like, I'm not wasting another 10 minutes on you. We'll do it later.
So Roger commented that sperm plugs are formed all year round. But
yeah, so that makes me wonder, is that something that needs to be cleared before they breed successfully? I don't know.
I've noticed some do the same thing as you mentioned, that I'll put them together and the male will have no interest till he drops those first ones, and then
Right.
some will even breed that female right then, whereas others will take another day or two for whether it's his hormones to ramp up a little more or the female to get a little more in her window, maybe, is part also.
Yeah. And I could even correlate that to the Sambos a little bit. Some of the males are really excitable and they will just go before they even lock up with the female. And maybe that's what the blue tongue is doing. Maybe he's just excited and he just prematurely goes. That could just be what that is. Or maybe it is the female's hormones. Maybe he sensed that her hormones weren't right, but he was ready to go, so he did his business and moved along.
Well, and some do seem like they're more willing, even though they might not fully be in their window. Like they're more, I guess, submissive, like whatever, do it and leave me alone, kind of.
Sure, yeah, definitely. I have a female that's she's never put up a fight for any of them for any reason. She's always submissive, but I still pair her multiple times just to be sure. But then I have other females that they definitely have a yes and a no. And when it's a no, it's a no.
And sometimes it's better to just try another day. I've seen people try to like tape the mouths or do like baby socks over them, but
I have done the Scotch tape. I've done Scotch tape around especially that female who is very aggressive. I've done that to her. She actually, kind of an interesting story. You would probably relate because I saw that you had a skink that broke its jaw. She
Yep.
actually broke my male's lower jaw. She bit him right on the face and broke it. So it's the same thing. He did a little. He didn't get food. He didn't get to eat for like 6 to 8 weeks, I think, and it healed up on its own. But yeah, same thing. she's very aggro. So I have used tape on her.
Well, luckily he healed all right though.
He did. Yeah. He's got a little gap in the front now, but it's not very bad at all.
Well, and it's hard because you can't do a perfect heal or a cast or kind of like how you do with humans. They don't really have much to attach it to.
Yep. Yeah. Luckily it was just a easy, just as long as you're not having him move his mouth, it'll heal on its own. They're pretty good at that. So.
Do you give your gravid females any additional supplements or food at all?
Yeah, I would. Yeah. I feed them more often. I also find that my gravid females seem to like live prey a lot more. So I'll do live pinky and fuzzy mice, live dubia roaches. I don't know what it is, but when I prepare what they normally like a nice prepared meal of all the stuff that I put in there all the time, sometimes they just don't want that. Even though they've ate it all the time before, when they're gravid, for some reason, they don't really like the plate of food. They'd rather have something that's moving in there. So, and sometimes I'll kind of trick them too. I'll make that plate of food and then I'll put a little cherry on top with a pinky mouse on top. So when they go to eat that live pinky mouse, they're getting a big mouthful of the food too. But I've also had some of the females go off food a lot. Like they just don't want to eat anything for a while. So it's hard to get nutrition into them when they're like that.
Yeah, I've done some similar. I do either dubia or I'll do pinkies, and then I'll do carnivore care with some calcium and multivitamin, and I coat the pinky in that.
Yeah,
And
I do the same thing. Yep.
then
Roll them
they'll
around
eat,
in it.
yeah, and then they'll eat that 95% of the time the females will, and that seems to get that, extra nutrition into them.
Yeah, that's
I've
what I find
noticed
too.
some females, it's almost like they don't get enough calcium. That's so that extra boost helps, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I do like the vitamin supplement and the calcium supplement, and I just kind of alternate between the two when I do feedings. But for gravid females, I give it to them like every time. But I give them both, both supplements every time, just to cover it, keep it going, give them all the extra nutrition.
Well, and they use a lot more. I can't remember what species it was, but one of them I was watching a podcast on. They use like 10 times the amount of calcium when they're pregnant.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah, absolutely.
Some of that's probably from, forming the eggs or whatever, but still, that's a lot more. What about frozen thawed quail for either the skinks, boas, or any of that?
I haven't done it for the snakes, but for the skinks, yep. Oh yeah, they love that too. So locally here, there's a person that sells the quail eggs, and yeah, I buy the lot of the quail eggs, and then I'll feed some of the quail eggs just as they are, but then hatch the others, and then as soon as they hatch, then you gas them and freeze them, and you can use those as treats just like you would the frozen thawed mice. Same thing.
Have you ever thought about breeding them, or is it not worth it, the amount that you get?
I think it would be, honestly. So my dad actually, when I was a kid, he bred birds quite a bit, and he bred a lot of birds, and quail was one of them that he bred. So I know how easy they are to breed, and they don't require a lot of space like you would think a bird would require. They really don't. So you can do it in pretty much any kind of backyard setup with a little hutch and that sort of thing. They even make these kind of breeding setups too they're really it's like a snake rack pretty much. They're just a compact rack that you can put them in and they'll breed and the eggs roll forward and you can collect those, and it's really easy. I don't do it, but it's probably something I could do if I wanted to scale up things.
I don't know how big your backyard is, but you're in California, right?
Yep.
Uh,
Yep.
what I've seen some people do, it's like it's an outside like portable quail thing that you move around the yard, you
Yeah, yeah,
know.
yeah. I think they call them coop tractors. I think coop
Sounds
tractors. They're
right.
like on wheels, kind of,
Yeah.
and you can pick it up and wheel it to a section of your yard and put it down, and the birds just stay under that, and they'll eat what's on the ground. You can give them feed and water through that, and you can just move it around.
Yeah, I don't know if where you're at, if because your winter's not as cold as Minnesota, where you might be able to
No,
actually do it outside.
yeah, you could. Yeah, the quail are hardy enough. You could, where I'm at, you could keep them all year round.
Just something to think about, and it could also, if you want to get big enough, you could even start selling those too.
Oh yeah, for sure. Even if you didn't want to sell the quail, there's a market here just for the eggs. Um, there's a lot of animals that eat eggs, and there's you could skip the work of raising babies, even just sell the eggs, and you maybe would at least break even pretty easily.
I've seen, what is it, the balut, the ones that are like partially incubated?
Yeah, I don't know
Those
what you
might
call
be,
those, but yeah.
yeah, those might be some too that I don't know how much different the nutritions is, but something different for the blue tongues to try.
Oh, for sure. I think they would love it. I think it
Yeah.
would. Yeah, it would go over well.
So you have a good mix of polygenic and a few genetic northerns. What are you
Mhm.
looking to add this season?
If I can, uh, for multiple reasons. Whether I can afford it is one thing, and whether I can find it is another. But I want to do the melanistics really, really badly. I've been bugging a few people that have them, probably bugging them too much. But I would love to get into the melanistic ones, and if I can, I would love to try. And I say try because I think it might be hard, but I would love to try to do two different versions of the melanistics. One that is pure Eastern, if I can find it, and one that isn't. Um, it's not a deal breaker for me if they're not pure, but like I said, if I can find that, that would be something that I would like to work towards, is having the two different kind of lines of them, I guess you could say.
Well, and it adds, some nice variety, and the ones that you don't keep, pure, you can mix to your white northerns or ivories, whatever.
Yep. And I think that, that would be, that's like the future goal, right? Is just to kind of get as many morphs as you can as you grow, and mix those together and come up with cool combos. Um, and I just don't think you're going to be able to do that in any kind of I don't want to say profitable or even scalable, but just, any kind of way that's going to be, producing really nice, robust, healthy animals. If you don't do the crossings, you almost need to do that to make sure that they're big, robust, healthy animals and they keep breeding for you. Because I think the pure Eastern lines are a bit smaller and tougher to deal with. It's a challenge I'm willing to do. I definitely would do it for sure. But that's just a separate thing that I would be like, okay, I'm going to keep these together. And if they don't go, or if I struggle with them, that's okay. But I do want all the rest of it to make some really cool, awesome looking animals that get in pet people's hands.
Well, and I think the key on both of them, trying to get healthier animals to outcross them too, whether it's, you got to take a longer route and maybe do like the het Eastern to an Eastern and go the pos het route, or maybe even another generation down the road, and then loop back around to strengthen it. But
yeah, I mean, I'm the kind of person that's going to do that anyway. No matter how fast I want to go, the route that I am going to take is going to be the long route. When I saw that white northern, or what they're calling ivory here, I knew it was something I wanted, and I was like, okay. I watched it for a good while, and I started to realize that these were all coming out of the same place. And so then after seeing that, I was like, okay, that's going to be a problem for me personally, knowing that they all came out of the same place. I don't want to buy a pair of white northerns and breed them together. Not out of this batch that has been, massively released anyway.
yeah.
Because you can even see it in some of the red lineage with the underbites, or in some of the like Turner white lineage with the squiggly tails. You can see that stuff kind of compounds over time. So there's really no reason to just start off compounding it for me. So I knew that I wanted to buy a visual and either outcross that as far as I can, or buy a visual from this massive release and try and find somebody who has a het, or I actually was lucky enough to find someone who actually did have a het, but their het came from a line that was imported from China into Canada and then imported from Canada into the US. So in my opinion, I can't verify this, but that was enough separation in the lineage from the current large release that happened, what was that, a year or two ago? That seemed like that would be a good way to go, is buy a het from that ivory line and then buy my visual and start working from there.
There's a chance that they're the same but different still. A lot of
right.
The original ones came from China.
Right. There, yeah. And I know that. But I also know that he did the work already to outcross it to a nice classic northern that had no line breeding lineage in it. So that's already a bonus for me.
Well, and also, so say, I'm just going to throw a number out there. I have no clue the actual number. Say 20 whites came 10 years ago that were all related. The one you got from the big release, is going to be significantly, pretty significant, unrelated as it's been bred their generations, because it's going to be, maybe second cousin, third cousin since it's been outcrossed, or maybe even fourth. It's kind of hard to know 100%.
Sure. Yeah.
But, even second cousin, that's what, 1.5% related? That's not bad.
No, not bad at all. No, definitely. And it doesn't worry me that much, but it is just the route that I would prefer to go. I would prefer to kind of get. We don't have the ability to get new stock in, so if you can find something that is as unrelated as possible to strengthen that line, that's always going to be the better way to go.
Well, and throughout the breeders that are here, there are a variety of lines that are pretty unrelated. There's a few Europe lines and a few Canada lines that are here.
Yep.
The stuff that came through China and some of the older US stuff, I'm not entirely sure where all that originated, but that's
Right.
been bred and outcrossed and turned into red line, orange line, and everything in between.
I mean, from what I could tell, all of the breeders that I know of currently, which isn't everybody, I'm sure, but most of the ones that I know of currently, it seems like everybody is doing their due diligence to create nice, healthy animals with the stock they have, and not breed, problems together or anything like that. So, I think everybody's doing what they're, the best they can.
Well, and the key when you do some that are, somewhat related, you got to make sure that you are outcrossing it. And depending on how related those ones are, it might be good to outcross them twice or,
Yeah, for sure. And, sometimes this is actually something I probably plan to do in the next year or two. Sometimes it actually is a good idea to do some closer breedings as well, depending on what kind of traits you're trying to narrow down. For instance, there's a trait that I've noticed in my collection that kind of, I would describe it as almost a hypo. What it does, in my opinion, is it kind of dilutes the blacks to a gray, and makes the rest of the colors almost pastel looking. And I'm going to probably try and breed some of my production either back to the original animal that had that, or sibling to sibling, to try and see if I can narrow that down a little bit. And if it works, then outcross again and then come back. And, so you kind of have to do this in and out thing to narrow down traits that you want to reproduce. So, sometimes you have to do that with what you're looking for, but you can do it in a way, like you said, where you bring it in and then you go out a generation or two and then you bring it back, and kind of this in and out sort of process.
And selectively pick some of the best examples. And like you
Right.
said before, the red lines they'll get the underbites, so look for that in your
Yep.
ones you're doing. And other, the like you said, the whites, the tails kink easier. And I think
Mm-hmm.
overall it seems like with some inbreeding that happens.
Yeah, and luckily, none of those kind of minor defects really seem to be. They don't even seem to be a problem as far as the health and longevity of the animal itself. It's just like a minor visual thing, really. I'm sure you could exacerbate that if you did it in a reckless way, but I think we're doing it in a way that's good enough that they're still healthy and awesome animals.
So living in Cali, how has your experience been vending the California expos?
I like it a lot. I've had a really good experience. So that first year I produced babies, I practically sold out my first show of blue tongue skinks. We, for some reason, the vendors down in my area don't have a lot of blue tongue skinks. There really is not a lot of competition at shows. There are other breeders out here, obviously, because I've been looking for them and buying from them. But when it comes to the show presence, there's not. You're not going to find a booth that has a whole bunch of blue tongue selections. You might find one here or there. The most common thing you're going to find is probably an imported Indonesian type at some of the bigger booths. But you're really not going to find a really hardy selection of captive bred stuff in my area. So when I brought those to my first show, like I said, I practically sold out of everything I had. I took home just a few animals and everything else sold. So it was really productive for me. And I didn't even, I'm all about, when I go to shows, I'm all about hands-on, showing people education, that sort of stuff. People already knew what they were. They knew what they wanted. And they were like, you have blue tongue skinks. I can't find these anywhere. And so they already know what they want. I just had them. So.
Well, and that's kind of the key or the nice thing, a lot of people don't do expos, and like in my area, it's the same thing. We're the only ones that are really breeding them and the only ones doing expos. There's some close by in Wisconsin, but they don't do many over this way. So you kind of get a nice market, and then you start getting your name out there and, kind of growing your brand, so to speak.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to do. I mean, I've been breeding for a long time, various species, and I've never used a business name or a brand. I never did that. Back when I started breeding, there wasn't that many shows. There was really only two, I think, in this state back then. And most of what I did personally was I bred my animals, here at my house, and um, I would just pack up my babies when they're ready, and I would drive around to the pet shops and just be like, "What do you think? Would you like to buy these?" And it's wholesale, so they're not. It wasn't lucrative at all. But I moved my babies. It was a hobby. It was just something I did for fun, and we luckily back then had a lot of pet shops in the area that would do reptiles. So it was not hard. But now it's a different ball game. Now you've got places like Morph Market. You've got numerous shows. I could go to a show probably every month in California alone, or close to it, if I wanted to. So there's a lot of opportunity to make a business. So that's when I kind of came up with, Scaly Crew Reptiles, and decided to start being more of a business type of situation. I'm not profitable yet, but maybe I will be.
Well, and it's hard. There is a bit of expenses that go into everything, and
For sure.
living animals, you gotta you want to give them quality. You don't want to do it too cheap and crappy that they suffer.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of why I'm not profitable even at year 3 under the Scaly Crew, business, is because the first 2 years I spent almost all of my money on, what I would call infrastructure. So supplies, caging, racks, all that sort of stuff. And that stuff is way more expensive than the animals. That stuff is crazy expensive. But you know, if you do it like I did it, where you buy that up front, it's there, and it's gonna stay there. It's ready. So all I have to do now is fill them up.
Yeah, having, you know, everything you need will make your life a lot easier.
Yeah.
So in May 17th, have you heard of the Reptile Talk show going on in Cali?
No. What's that about?
So it's a newer show that different breeders and organizations are talking at. I just recently found out about it, so I figured I'd ask you, being, you know, you live in the state.
Yeah, shoot. No, I haven't. So it's
I
called the
know,
Reptile Talk Show?
yeah, May 17th. It's,
Okay.
I know, like Herp Time's going to be talking, US Arc, Sim Container,
Ooh.
and a couple other people that I'm drawing a blank on their names right now, but
Okay. Yeah.
I think,
Yeah, those are names that I know from around here. I think Alex is the sim container guy. I think he's actually local to my area, like very close, very close.
yeah, and I think Herp Time's in California somewhere too, also.
Yep, he's further south than me though. But yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think if you're talking, you could sell animals maybe or something like that. So I don't know. Doesn't sound like there'll be a ton of vendors,
Well, that's okay.
but
You know, if they're starting, if it's a brand new thing, it's still something to pay attention to for sure.
yeah, you know, it's something to look into. Might be beneficial to learn something. You know, obviously I just heard about it, so I don't know all the details.
Yeah. I haven't heard about it at all, so I'm gonna look it up. I'm definitely gonna look it up.
Um, so to kind of wrap it up, is there any final thought you'd like to leave to the listeners? Any
Um,
advice or
I don't know that I have a lot of advice because I'm still, you know, learning stuff myself, especially with the blue tongues. Um, but I just would say for me and for what I am doing, I just want people to know that I'm doing, you know, I want to produce healthy, vibrant animals for the pet market. So, you know, a lot of people kind of might get caught up in uh, the money aspect or trying to produce the highest end of the highest end stuff. And while I love that too, I definitely love that too. But I am more geared towards making sure that I'm going to get an animal into someone's hands that's almost foolproof. I would rather produce an animal that isn't like worth $10,000, but is not going to cause the person who buys it any kind of trouble. You know, I want a healthy eater. I want healthy genetics. I want robust animals that are going to be uh, interactive and awesome pets. I think sometimes when you in this industry, at least particularly in the US, when you have somebody who's like, "Oh, you're a pet breeder," it's almost like you're talking down on that, or like it's a negative, like, "Oh, you're just making pet quality animals, like they're garbage." But in my opinion, we need that. We don't need people out there making these exclusive $10,000 animals that nobody's going to buy, and honestly, they're probably so fragile or so rare that they're hard to keep or hard to get established or hard to reproduce, that sort of thing. I want to make animals that look great but are easy and healthy, and I can get them in somebody's hands and they're going to be like, they're going to have a great experience. They're going to be like, "Oh, this animal, you gave it to me, and it's eating, and it loves its enclosure, and it loves me, and we can get along with each other, and it's not crazy wild, that sort of thing. Every animal, of course, is going to be different. They all have their own personalities and that sort of thing, but I work with all of my animals, so I want everybody to know that if you're getting something from me, it's not something that was like mass produced in a box, or in a number of boxes. It's something that if you bought that animal from me, I have interacted with that animal since the day it was born, and I know I can tell you anything you want to know about it. If you wanted to know if that snake ever missed a single meal, or ever had a weird shed, or ever had a snippy attitude moment or something, I could tell you that. Same with the blue tongue skinks. I'm working with them from the day they're born, every day, holding them, getting them out. Interactivity with these animals is key, in my opinion, for the pet trade. If you're breeding stuff in a box and that's all it sees is the walls of a box until it goes to its new home, it's just not gonna behave in a pet quality manner, in my opinion. So my animals are always handled out and about. They're eating great. They're living great. And they're meant to go to a pet home. They're meant to go to someone who's going to do the same thing. They're going to get it out, and they're going to play with it, and, have a good time, that sort of thing. So, that's just something that I want to make sure that differentiates me from anybody else that might be doing the same thing. If everybody's looking for something different, but if you want to narrow it down as to why you want to get it from me, those are the reasons why you would want to get it from me. Is if you want that pet that's probably going to be a lot more well started and ready to go to your home from my home, sort of situation.
Yeah, socializing them definitely makes, the future owner's life easy. But, I wanted to add, it's not a bad thing, making animals for, we'll just call it pet keepers. They will give that animal a great, amazing home for its rest of its life. They'll deck it out, give it a amazing home. So, that's always the benefit of this, the ones that go to those good homes, and, the species that we work with, they all make great pets.
Yeah, those are the species that I am always interested in too. I'm not, there's some really amazing looking animals out there in a lot of people's collections. But to me, there are certain animals that don't fit my my kind, my, I don't know how to put it, my aesthetic, I guess, what I'm trying to say. So like you can have these really beautiful tree boas and things like that, but they're just not an animal that you're going to let out in your house and hang out with for a few hours. That's not what a tree boa is going to do, and you're not ever going to make a tree boa do that. So that, to me, that's just an animal that I wouldn't work with, or try to work with, because that doesn't fit the way I want to do things. I want an animal where I can take it out and let it roam around my house for 30 minutes or so and not worry about it doing anything, or just be interactive with it too. So blue tongue skinks, these Sambos, they're crazy good pets. They don't mind being out and about, whereas other animals, if you some of these animals, if you even look at them too much, they don't even want to be looked at. close the door, turn the lights off, and put a cover over the cage. They'd rather be happier like that, which is totally fine. I'm not against that at all. But that's not the type of stuff I want to work with. So everything I want to work with is something that can be out and about and interacted with between the human and animal interactions. So
well, and that it's a lot wider market that you're able to reach then too, versus venomous, for example, is a very niche market that
for sure.
99.5 or maybe even more percent of the US shouldn't own one.
Yeah.
Well, whereas most people could figure out the care for a blue tongue or a sand boa or a gecko.
Yeah, definitely. There's actually a
Well,
guy that's local to me that does beaded lizards, and he works with venomous stuff. He's got cobras and things like that too. And boy, I respect the hell out of that guy, and I absolutely love what he does because he does it in the safest, most professional way possible. And he has a clientele that's going to be looking for that, and that is perfect. Like he knows what he likes, and he knows who his market is, and that's perfect. That's we can all have different things and all still be part of this hobby together. It's really no different what he's doing from what I'm doing. He has great healthy animals, and he has a very respectable clientele that are looking for those animals, and that's really no different than what I'm trying to do. I want to make great animals for that pet market clientele. So they're really, if you just break it down on that aspect, we're all doing the same thing, just with different animals.
100%. Well, I wanted to thank you for coming on tonight.
Definitely. Thank you very much. I appreciate this.
Where's the best place for someone to reach out if they're we talked about sorry.
No, that's all right. I would say Instagram at Scaly Crew Reptiles is probably where I'm most active, but I do post on like all the other social media platforms. So I have Twitter or X, Facebook. I'm also on Morph Market's I think it's called Cold Blooded. Hold on, let me just double check that and make sure that's what it's called. Yeah, coldblooded.com. That's like Morph Market's Facebook, I guess you could say. I'm on there. Yeah, right now I'm vending quite a few of the California shows. So if you see me there, you can find me there. And if I'm not there, it's probably because I'm out of stock or I just couldn't fit that show in my schedule.
You also breed geckos too, for if anyone's looking for those also, right?
Yeah. I started 2 projects. Like I said before, I like to start with just a one animal or 2 to see if I like them, and that was my Leachianus project. I love those things. Those are incredible animals. So I do have a pair of Leachianus geckos that are of the Moro Isle locality. I'm breeding those. I got my first set of eggs from her just a couple weeks ago. And then I'm also breeding a very small but very specific group of crested geckos. They're the Super Dalmatians. So I have a group of crested geckos in the Super Dalmatian morph. And I also breed isopods. So I have 1, 2, 3. I have 4 different species of isopods currently that I also breed. So I have those pretty routinely as well.
Adds a nice variety to the table, from
Yeah.
Well, thank you again, Ken, for coming on. You have a great
Definitely.
rest of your night.
I will. You
And
too. Thank you.
thank you for watching, everyone. Good night.
Yep.